This is the Veterinary Project Podcast, episode 131.
Welcome to the show created by vets featuring absolutely no pets. This is the Veterinary Project Podcast, hosted by Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Leicht. Our resident veterinarians have swapped out their stethoscopes in favor of microphones to bring you the Veterinary Project Podcast, a show focused on real conversations, aimed to connect this amazing profession full of remarkable people. Through the sharing of collective stories and wisdom, and connecting over the many unique challenges we face, we invite you to join our community of veterinary professionals leading intentional lives. And now, here are the hosts of the Veterinary Project Podcast, Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Leicht.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Another episode of the Veterinary Project Podcast. Jonathan, you're looking good. How are things going out there?
Mike, sometimes you got to dress up even when you're not feeling good. And that's one of these days here. Put on the shirt. Formally, for those that are not watching, which will be the majority, the shirt sleeves are rolled up because it's the spring season in Western Canada finally, which is amazing. So overall, doing all right. Energy a little bit low. We're still going to make this a great episode for everybody listening. How about yourself?
Yeah, before I go into that, I've been very guilty of work from home, and all of a sudden it's 2 p.m. and I'm wearing the husky sweatpants, and I'm like, what are you doing, man? Like, put a little effort here into the clothes. And you're right, when you put on, like, it doesn't have to be a tuxedo or anything, but just good looking clothes, you feel better. And it's funny, before we hit record, we know each other well enough now. I was like, what's up? Like, you're looking really sharp, but I could tell. I was like, what's bothering you? What's going on?
Yep. Totally. And we had that good discussion. And you know what? I actually have a rule. So talking, through COVID and pandemic and hybrid work, I actually have a rule. I'm not allowed to wear sweats, shorts, anything, even if I'm at home office, because there's absolutely a difference in how you dress, how you look at yourself personally, and then how you present to the outside world, I think, in terms of what you get done and not. And I think it's a subconscious piece that is effective. Yep. Look at that. We got a tool and trick right off the start.
I guess, but I look at this, like, as everyone knows, because I've just ranted on it so much, my environment stuff in 2022 that I deep dove, that's just another piece. When you put that, it cues you. I looked at you and I was like, damn, he's looking sharp. It just sets the tone.
Let's not go overboard. I appreciate your comments.
Yeah. So, what's funny, ironically, for everyone listening here, if you remember last episode, we set the scene and we are going to be talking about relationships today.
Yeah.
And funny enough, we both got onto this call and we knew this is what we're talking about. And we said, we're like, I think we should go listen to a podcast on relationships rather than be recording it, because as with everything in life, there's ebbs and flows, and we both do a lot of things well. And we also do a reasonable amount of things poorly. And we're both kind of where we're like, do we just suck at relationships, or what's going on here? Because we're having a few struggles, but we're going to do our best.
That's the beauty about the Veterinary Project. And I really hope that whoever's listening is taking this to heart, because we're putting our heart out there that, sometimes it is a struggle. And I think both you and I on the overall are pretty darn good in terms of getting to know people and feel like we're inclusive and enjoying that relationship building mode. But sometimes it is still tough. And it's interesting that both you and I are going through one of those tough moments right now in different ways, and sometimes in similar, that we'll talk about today.
Yeah.
Yep.
So just a reminder for everyone, how this came to pass was, I think it was last episode, we were just bantering, and I was doing that sort of 10x versus 2x exercise where I have to look at, areas of my life where I'm having success, and then drilling in, okay, what's the 20% inside of that? And something that jumped out for me was, in areas of my life that I'm having success, I can trace it down to key relationships. That was a theme that just jumped out, right? Whether it was in my health or my business or, whatever garden of life we want to look at, if I drilled deep enough, it was a relationship or two that sort of stuck out and was like, this is the key to success, right? And you picked up on that right away, and we're like, we got to have an episode on that. So here we are.
Yeah. And when I relate that to veterinary medicine, yes, we have such an important role to play in animals' lives and what we can do for our clients that are coming in that we serve, whether it's small, large, exotic, etc. But everything is based off of relationships still, whether it's within the clinics, whether it's with our clients, our suppliers, the outside world. And so, yeah, I think from a theme for today's conversation, looking at what we're doing well, what we're not, trying to tie that back into individuals' careers and personal relationships in the ebbs and flows that are positive and negatives to having successful lives. I think one of the most important and key factors is the relationships you build, let go of, or in some instances, let fall because you haven't done a good enough job.
Yeah, I like how you frame that too. Lots of them we want to foster and nurture and build. Sometimes you have to let them go, and that can be challenging. So I guess let's dive in. As you said, this is not an episode of here's Mike and Jonny telling you all the things we're superstars at. This is more of a discussion of here's some things we do well, here's some things we do poorly. So let's jump in. Kick us off. Whatever side you want to go to, good or bad.
You know what? We normally start with the good. I'm going to start with the bad today because we're going to switch it up a little bit. When I look at the areas of life, and as I have moved within my career and taken on different leadership roles, one of my mentors has always brought up that you have to be responsible to your relationships, both in your personal and your professional life. I'm in my early 40s now. I have young kids. There are many responsibilities that we have, my wife and I, that live outside of what we used to be able to do socially. As a result of it, my social friend group has gone down, and I have not done a good enough job of watering the garden related to personal social relationships that I need and I want in order to ensure that the next 40 years are as fun and impactful as my first 40 years. Because in my 20s and early 30s, gold. And I thought I was really good at it and we could keep them up, but I've let that slip. There are certain personal close friends that not at all. We follow through. Communication is great, but that number is a lot less. Part out of necessity, but part out of my lack of follow-up. And that is a struggle.
Man, that's a good point. I mean, it's just life. Like it's going to change. We don't have the free time that we had in university. I do know every time I see you like physically in person or when a group of us gets together, we always regret how much time passes before we do it again. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's just so much to do. But again, is that an excuse? Yes, we all use it. There's so many ways that we can excuse not getting together. And we were talking pre-recording to have, Devin, who's one of our good buddies who's, passed away here in the last 6 months, call randomly, finding out what's happening in life and family and not related to business, but just those aspects. I miss that. And I go, okay, there was a guy that glued us together. What am I doing to follow that with our other internal close friends? And if we don't do it consciously, it's really hard to do it unconsciously. There's a few of us, and I think you and a couple of our other friends are good, but it's got to be done more.
Yeah. Even the way you said it, like there's some people that act as the glue, they'll be the ones that spearhead the meetup or whatever, like, hey, we're doing this. And then there'll be others that are more passive that, I'll tag along if someone else sets it up. So like you said, making that effort is key. This would be something also that I do poorly currently and way more personal. It'd be me and my relationship with Rosalie, who's my wife. And it's trying to carve out that block of time to just go do whatever we want to do. Go for dinner, go for a walk, just the two of us, right? Like no kids, no clients, no work stuff. It's embarrassing. Like if I'm sitting here trying to think, when's the last time we did that? And it's like, I couldn't even tell you right now, and It is like, that's the fire hose of life, but that's an excuse.
It is, isn't it? But then there's where both you and I need help from the outside.
Yeah.
And hopefully there's some comments and such that come through of going, Mike, Jonny, here's what you need to do. Because it's so important. And especially with our most loved ones.
Yeah.
Like I can think about that for my family and desiring to maintain strong relationships. Dude, you got to put the time in.
Yeah.
It's really tough.
I'm going to sort of piggyback here. I don't know if this falls under something I'm doing poorly or good, depending on the relationship. Time and attention. So I used to always have time was the gold standard. Okay, you got to spend time together. And more recently, it's been brought to my attention. Attention is actually more valuable than time, because you can be spending time with someone, but if you're not present, if you're not paying attention, it's like, well, what good is it? And that really threw me for a loop. And I started evaluating how I was showing up, even say at the breakfast table or at supper time. And it's like, are you sitting there on your phone, or are you actually conversing with the people around the table? So
Yep.
I agree. Number one, there has to be that block of time, but then when you actually find yourself there, you need to be giving it your attention. Right. And
Absolutely.
You had mentioned Devin. So I remember when we all got together, I don't know if anyone was on their cell phone all night. It was just 10 or 15 dudes just 100% engaged in that room. And it was so cool.
Completely agree with you that when you are engaged, watching that flow of communication and love and just the joking around, wow, is it so much better? And you bring up something I also recognize is quality versus quantity, and that leads back to your conversation of at the Christmas table, at the breakfast table, is looking at what is, there's some references out there in social media and such. It's got to be quality time. I don't know if I'm as much of an advocate for that, as opposed to just time together, as long as your attention is on that conversation and or that person. And again, is really tough when our attention is divided so many ways. Pure excuse. And in the vet clinic, it happens all the time. Yep.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like you got to put the reps in, like the quantity of time, eventually the quality will come out of that. Right. Just as you're putting that time in, it takes a while sometimes to drop in the conversation or, in the relationship to get to that level where it's okay, now we're really connecting. But
so how do you put the time in? Like when you say, you got to do the reps, what do you do?
Well, I mean, this is a do as I say, not as I do moment currently. Like I try to, block it and bookend it, but as I said, I'm doing a poor job currently in the personal relationships. I know in some of the business relationships, I'm better because it gets more formalized, I guess. If it's like, okay, we're meeting up at this time and that expectation is clear. I find in the personal relationships, it's more wishy-washy because you're just sort of coming and going. Like, right, we live at the same house, so we always see each other, but we don't actually stop and be like, hey, let's stop and talk.
And hard as well too, when you're business partners and entrepreneurs together, and knowing that there's 20 other things that you do want to talk about as well, but hey, those take precedence, and or the children that are attached to it as well too. Yep.
Yeah. Any other on the negative column before we pivot over? And
yeah, absolutely. I could keep on going and going, and I'm sure there's a few that could continue. Change in direction. I wrote that down. Again, it's all excuses, but there's so much going on in my head sometimes that I'm changing directions and or focus of this one relationship. And they're like, well, where do I stand with Jonathan? Where is my relationship with Jonathan? And I know that's a piece I have to continue to work with to continue that flow all the way through, so that if and when we're chatting about a certain piece, or again, and this is professional or personal, that it's carried through to conclusion so that you can meet the next and the next. And that's enjoyable. And I love seeing that follow up. But I can find myself as a negative where, because of the direction, again, excuse can sometimes lead to confusion in my relationships.
Yeah. And sorry, were you saying like what is your relationship with Jonathan, like yourself, like personally, or?
No, others with me.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Others with me. I think I've got a pretty good relationship with myself. I'm comfortable with that end. Yeah.
Good. I had something similar. I had ego down, being right. I'll put this sort of in the transition column. I think I do a reasonable job of it, but it definitely flares up. And this was from last episode. I had said, I'm having some challenges. It's in the business realm, in the financing world of real estate. There's a lot of things going on, and some of them are really challenging. And I'll find like my internal voice, my ego will flare up and be like, I'm right. Like, can't you see it? Like, here, look at this financial statement. Like, right. That's the type C disc profile of me. That's just like, this is simply numbers. It's right here. And I have to stop and be like, okay, there's another person in this conversation, and they're sitting on a different side of the table. They're not against me. They just have a different perspective.
Yep.
What might that perspective be? And this is the mindfulness piece, breathing has really helped with that, to just put some time in there, give yourself, take a few breaths, then you can move forward, instead of reacting. So I'm going to call that in transition for myself.
Do you think that's a matter of maturity and time and years that also is helping it?
I would think so, like I have to assume, because I don't know what, if I think of a younger version of myself, I would be more, not that I was ever a hothead, I guess, but I would be more apt to like react without, thinking it through. And I've just developed more skills. You get more reps. You've been in more situations where something is confrontational or disappointing, so it's not as triggering. But
yep. No, I think you mentioned a whole bunch of pieces that people work on, and I would agree. I see you in action that way, and I think you have a really good ability to put your ego aside. Again, there's some that will frustrate, right?
Yeah. So I guess let's look at the other side of the coin here. Let's lighten this conversation. Let's brag about ourselves. What do we do good?
I don't think it's bragging. I think it's putting the time in terms of active listening and wanting to be engaged with that individual on the other side. I think you and I both do that well, where we want to know and we want to learn. And when you do that, you have a better chance of getting to know that person as an individual, not as an object. And in leadership roles, in business, in personal, wow, does that make a difference? And I think, from a positive, I see that in you. So I'm speaking on your behalf. You can counter me. I think that is a positive, but it has to be continually worked on so that you don't stray to the other side.
Mm-hmm. As you were saying that, again, that word curious comes out, which is just like so funny over how, 130 episodes, like that is just such a common theme. And that's how I see both of us generally approaching relationships, is, as you say, we're just genuinely curious about like, hey, what's going on in that person's world? Yeah. And then the other thing I look at is like time horizon, like thinking generally very long term, where it's like, it's like, I just want to get to know you. Like, I don't need there to be a transaction that happens ever. Like, certainly not today or next month or this year. Let's just see what each other's about. And if down the road there's alignment and something comes of that, cool, we'll explore that then.
It's a good feeling, isn't it? I think transition and maturity, I'm going towards that. I'm not always there, but wow, it's a long game. This is a long game, and the game is life. And when you have long-lasting relationships of trust where communication and curiosity is there, holy heck, does it make it better, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, you can, like, I won't paint any pictures here to like put anyone in a corner, but everyone has those relationships where you can just tell the person is just angling at getting something. And like, it's our intuition immediately picks it out. And it's like, how does that feel? Like, it doesn't feel very good. No one wants that.
Yep. Agreed. So pieces to work on. And there's so many tactics related to it and communication seminars and such that you and I are not professionals at. So I don't think we should advocate to teach the people on the podcast today on how to do that.
No, I'll tell a quick story on communication because you mentioned it. I was chatting with a business owner recently, and they got their first negative Google review, and that was fairly upsetting to them. And of course, there's a whole team here at play. So they weren't sure even necessarily where did this Google review come from? Like, what happened? So they reached out to the person as the business owner and said, I just want to understand this, right? Like, can you please help me understand where was the breakdown? Like, what happened? Where did we not meet your expectation? And the person had kind of offered, like, it was a breakdown in communication, right? They thought the loop was going to be closed and it never was. So they were frustrated. And then they kind of confessed that what triggered the Google review was they actually saw some of the branding of the company. And just in that moment, they were like, reminded of feeling very frustrated and thought, I'm going to take this out by putting this Google review out there. And they, temporarily felt better. And the owner, never really even brought that up, didn't ask for them to remove the review. They just said, we genuinely want to know how we can make our system and our process better so this does not happen again. And the call ended. And then a couple of days later, the person reached back out and said, you know what, I've taken that review down. And they were like, oh, well, thank you. That's your decision. And she's like, I know. The reason I took it down is because you didn't ask me to. Like, if you would have led with, please take that review down, it makes us look really bad. That's so self-serving, right? But it wasn't. They came at it from, hey, I want to understand you. Where did we mess up? What can we do better? So that communication piece. This is where I feel like Jordan will just jump in as a third co-host right now and drop communication bombs, but it's so fundamental.
It's such a great story. And I think we should finish pretty close to that story if it was me. And like you said, get Jordan on for another episode of those tactics. Because what a great, in veterinary medicine, this happens, unfortunately, more commonly than not. And I'm not describing that business owner as being in vet med, but what a great approach, acknowledging that you're not after anything. You want to actually learn, take in positive feedback, and grow from it. And look at what happened as a result.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Well, I guess let's leave it there for this sort of very informal episode on relationships. I would be very curious for all the listeners, if they have any gems and pearls, drop those in some of our social media posts and whatnot to help Jonathan and I learn. Because that's the beauty of why we're doing this podcast, is we connect with cool people and we get to learn a lot. So I know we appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
It's one of those episodes that we thought at the start, do we do this today based on some struggles that were both happening? But guess what? We have the advantage of then being able to have a listenership that hopefully is able to help us guide the right way, even when we're not at our best.
Yeah. I bet everything we talked about, there's listeners out there that are like, yep, that's me also, right? Like we're not unique and alone in this, but at least we're trying.
Just putting it out to the world for people to listen to,
and
hopefully get some entertainment from and learn.
Okay, right on. Well, let's wrap it there. Hope everyone got a little bit of value, something to think about, and share your tips, because we need to improve.
Thank you for listening to the Veterinary Project Podcast. As a recap on behalf of our hosts, the Veterinary Project Podcast will be releasing new episodes every 2 weeks. So be sure to tune in as we bring you more conversations aimed at helping you enjoy a life well lived. If you enjoyed what you heard on the show and want to stay in the know, please like, love, and or subscribe to the podcast on the listening platform of your choosing, as we're available on all the usual suspects. If you know of others who may benefit from these conversations, we'd love it if you shared the show with them. This helps us to grow our community and reach more and more veterinary professionals, just like you. Speaking of which, if you would like to get connected with more like-minded individuals who are joining us on this journey, please send us a message via Instagram @The Veterinary Project, and we'll invite you to be a part of our private Facebook group. General feedback, requests for information, or requests to be a guest on the show can also be sent via direct message to our Instagram @The Veterinary Project. Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Leicht, thank you for listening to the show, and we'll catch you again in 2 weeks for another episode of the Veterinary Project Podcast. Bye for now.